welcome back. In this PowerPoint, we're going to talk about emotions and substituting oils. You can also find the information presented here on page 18 to 20 of your notes in a lot more detail. So, raindrop technique is a really powerful connection. Now, some people perform raindrop purely from a physical perspective. The focus is on the body, helping it to become more supple and relaxed. And that's great. People love physical results, but raindrop can be so much more than just a physical experience. It can be performed with this beautiful, deep connection that takes the experience far beyond the physical movements of raindrop technique or even the oils. It takes your raindrop to another dimension. And this is where Gary used to take it. When Gary was touching someone in raindrop, he was being with their spirit. He sensed what they needed, what was going on in their body, and what oils to use. And that person felt that connection very deeply. They felt nurtured and cared for. And because they felt safe, they let go and surrendered to their session and their own process. Now, emotions may come to the surface as they surrender and as the person begins to feel whole again. This is what we teach you in your practical training weekend. We're going to teach you not just to perform raindrop physically, we're going to teach you how to take it to that next dimension, how to really be with a person's spirit. Now, there are a couple of simple ways that you can achieve that. And we'll remind you of these at the practical training weekend. But they're very simple techniques. And I want you to practice this at home before the weekend comes. Just when you're having a conversation with people, or just when you're spending time with your kids or your partner. I want you to firstly still your own mind chatter. Just let yourself be with that person. Put your attention on them and not on other things going on in your life. Put aside thoughts of your own and have your mind fully present with that person. And when you're performing raindrop, have your mind fully present with that person and raindrop. Now, this takes practice and diligence, and it's a goal that you can aim for. Most of us have a million things going on, so we can often find it difficult to still your mind. So I want you to consider trying some essential oils like Present Time or sandalwood or acceptance. Put it on your throat and your wrists and have a caring heart when you perform raindrop technique. But the same goes when we're even just communicating with the people in our everyday life. If we just quiet our mind, give all of our attention to that person, really be with them and have a caring heart to what we are sharing with them in that moment, everything about our experience deepens to a greater level. And that's what we're talking about when you're going to be conducting raindrop technique. We're going to show you what that feels like and what that looks like. Joy and rose oils also are fantastic for helping us move into a heart space. You just want to put a drop over your heart chakra in the center of your chest under clothing because joy is a photosensitive oil. Now, some tips for your recipient are very simple things that you can do to get them to assist in that connection. Firstly, we always want to encourage them to be silent and only talk to you if they need to. Now, obviously, it's important that they let you know if they're in any discomfort or they need to go to the toilet. But what we want to do is avoid idle chatter between you and them once you've started the session. That means what I'm talking about is don't discuss the weather or the visitors they've had or their recent holiday, those kinds of things. Now, there's always going to be exceptions to the rule. Some people need to talk as part of their own healing journey, and you can allow them to talk if you feel that they need to. But if they continue with unnecessary chattering, just encourage them to close their eyes and just receive. Now, if they're still not relaxing, you can put a drop of valerian oil under their nose, which is not a very nice smelling oil. So that could definitely get them to stop talking. Or you could maybe even use something like lavender, just something a little bit soothing and calming. Just make sure it's not a hot oil and not a photosensitive oil. Okay. So let's talk about emotions and raindrops. Now, when you connect with your recipient in raindrop technique, they will feel safe. And it's in this safe environment that their emotions may come to the surface. But do you know how to recognize emotions? Now, certainly there are overt signs of emotion: anger, tears, laughter, shaking, and cold. However, there are also covert signs of emotion, which are less easy to recognize. And these include chattering, yawning, temperature changes, out of body or feeling spaced out, tummy rumbling. Another sign is when your recipient takes a deep releasing breath. I always joke with people and say it sounds like the Darth Vader breath, but it really does. It's like your recipient will be on the table, they'll be completely relaxed, their breathing will just be very soft and gentle, and then all of a sudden you will hear out of nowhere. That is a really beautiful covert emotional release. And I've personally experienced a number of my clients having that and then coming back to me a couple of days later and saying, my whole world has changed. My whole disposition on how I behave at work, how I feel when I'm with my partner, with my family, everything has changed for the better. So these covert emotional responses are really beautiful shifts. Tummy rumbling is a very common one. And people will often feel a little bit funny about it because they can hear their tummy rumbling and they know they're not hungry, but it won't stop making noises. So that too is also an emotional release. Now, it can also include agitation, where the recipient focuses on something inconsequential and becomes upset or worried about it. Now, I've asked permission from one of our beautiful students, who's often an assistant for us, to share this story because it happened to her and she had us all in stitches when she was telling us about it. So she had come to the practical training on the Saturday. She had given and received a raindrop technique. Her husband was cooking dinner for her that night when she went home after the course, and he had told her he was going to make lentils. Now, for whatever reason, he didn't make lentils. He decided and changed his mind to make something else. But of course, she was going home expecting to eat that. And she got really fixated on the fact and really agitated about the fact that he hadn't made the lentils, to the point that she said that they even had quite an argument about it and how angry and annoyed she felt. She just said, I couldn't control it. It was this unbelievable anger about him not cooking lentils. And of course, the next morning she's come in and we've shown this beautiful PowerPoint slide, and she's burst into tears and said to us, oh my God, I realise now why I was so upset about the lentils. And of course, none of us knew what she was talking about. So she shared with us, but it was a beautiful explanation to all of us about how she was describing that it was just this agitation she couldn't let go of. She was fixated on lentils. And I've seen other people do it, they become fixated on how cold it feels, whereas it's actually not cold at all. Or, they're worried about being taking up too much of your time, and they become really agitated about that. But you may not have another client for the rest of the day, and you're quite happy to spend the extra time, but it causes them some sort of agitation or fixation. That too is often very much a sign of a covert emotional release. So, what do we do when someone is having an emotional release? Well, there's a few things you can do. But firstly, if the emotional release is one of the covert signs, the person themselves may not actually be aware of it. So you're going to need to follow your instincts. You may let them know that what you're observing and that this is a typical sign of an emotional release without the overt emotion. So, if someone said, "Oh, my tummy wouldn't stop rumbling," you can say, "Yeah, well, actually, that's one of those covert emotional releases." So, emotion shifting inside of you when that happens. And then that way the recipient knows what's really happening. You're giving that level of reassurance. And sometimes by knowing that, you might find that the real emotions start to surface. Now, on the other hand, if someone is having an overt emotional release, such as crying, they are in an altered state of consciousness. At that moment, they are deeply connected with themselves and more aware of themselves. So it is really important not to interrupt this process. If you are not trained in emotional therapies, you might find yourself tempted to stroke the person or hug them as a means of offering comfort, like going, "Oh, it's okay, don't stress, it'll be okay." But when you stroke them or talk to them like that, you're actually bringing their attention back into the room and to you and away from themselves. We don't want to do this. They are in a special process that will unfold naturally and in a way that is perfect for them. So instead, here's what you should do. Maintain body contact in silence. Encourage them to breathe if they are holding their breath while crying. So sometimes people will be, and they'll just hold their breath. So in order to get them to release that breath, you may need to just gently and quietly say to them, "Just take a breath." And they'll usually respond by doing so. And then just quietly tell them again to take another breath if they need it, if you find they're holding it again. And then just quietly tell them to keep breathing deeply. Now, the breathing doesn't stop the tears. It simply allows the emotions to flow more freely and not be shoved back inside. You can offer them tissues, but only do it if they ask for it, because it's amazing that in an emotional release, most people won't want any distractions and won't want tissues. As soon as you offer them, you're bringing their attention back to you in the room. You might verbally reassure them and ask them to tell you if they need anything, and then be silent again and allow them to go through their process. You also may intuit some of the emotional oils or blends to apply to them as they're going through their release. Oils like joy, release, surrender, and grounding are excellent. And after the session, if they are still going through emotional challenges, listen to them. If you feel it's appropriate, encourage them to seek the help of a friend or a professional. If you're not skilled in emotional support and counselling, don't attempt to be that person. It's okay for you to refer them to someone who can help them best. Now, some of our students become really nervous when we talk about an emotional release. They feel that they wouldn't know what to do. I want to reassure you guys, your client will only go into an emotional state if they feel safe. If you don't feel comfortable with emotions, then it's unlikely that you will attract people who will have emotional releases. However, if an emotional release happens when you are giving someone a raindrop technique, know that you have been chosen by their spirit as the best person to help them. Trust your instincts and support them in the best way that you can. There are other beautiful ways that we can perform raindrop using emotional oils to support them further in their next session. And there is also a wonderful class that Artemis teaches called the Egyptian Emotional Clearing Technique. It's also a beautiful companion to raindrop. It's called EECT for short, and I highly recommend you attend it. It teaches you how to connect with your intuition when you're working with the Young Living oils. And it also trains you in an excellent technique for emotional support. EECT was based on the ancient Egyptian ritual for cleansing the spirit. And both techniques can support profound shifts in the physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual realms. However, even though generally raindrop technique is targeted more to the physical, we can take it to an emotional level. And I'll talk to you guys more about that later on. Now, when it comes to substituting oils, Gary Young always said that his biggest challenge was to do raindrop technique the same way twice. Every time he taught it differently because no two people need exactly the same oils. However, the application would always be the same. So that means that the various techniques should all look the same, even if they're performed with different oils. Now, common substitutes that you'll find is that you might use balsam fir instead of basil, or you could choose a single oil contained in the blend. So, for example, Valor has frankincense or black spruce in it. So instead of Valor, you might want to use just frankincense or just black spruce. Or you could choose a blend that contains that single oil. So you could potentially use Panaway instead of wintergreen. Now we have a beautiful selection of intention cards with raindrop. And they're all the raindrop oils and all the suitable substitute oils that can go with them. But we will teach you how to intuitively select oils as well at your practitioner retreat assessment. So after your assessment has been done at your 3-day retreat, the third day is a beautiful pampering day where we teach you those extra skills. You're going to learn about how to do an extended Valor balance, connecting with your intuition. You're going to learn how to use hot stones to heighten the experience of raindrop for those people you want to give a little bit of extra nurturing to. And we're also going to show you how to utilize some other beautiful complementary therapies to your raindrop technique. We do have some guidelines for substituting oils. So you don't have to substitute oils. Just remember that. The 9 oils of raindrop technique are extremely powerful and effective in their own right, but sometimes you will want to introduce extra oils into your raindrop technique to tailor it to your recipient's needs. Now, if you're just introducing a couple of additional oils, then they can be added in along with the standard 9 oils. So, for example, you wanted to add in hope or grounding, you might put hope somewhere in the Vitaflex and perhaps grounding at the end when you're feathering it in. You'll feel when the time is right to add those additional oils. There's no hard and fast rules in the additional application. However, there are some rules that we do need to follow. Now, providing these oils that you are intuitively feeling to add to the raindrop technique are not contraindicated, you're always going to start with Valor or a Valor substitute, then oregano and thyme on the feet. You're always going to start with oregano and thyme on the back, unless they're contraindicated. And you're always going to finish with Valor or a Valor substitute on the back. Apart from that, you can add any extra oils in at that stage. At any stage, sorry. And you can anoint the body with additional oils during the Valor balance. You can add additional oils in during Vitaflex, or you can just add some extra oils onto the back, dripping them on and feathering them in as usual. So we are saying that you would use the 9 standard raindrop oils and then an extra couple. So that makes a rule of thumb of 11 different oils. If you plan on using more oils than this, then you need to remove some of the standard raindrop oils so you can keep to about 11 different oils. We don't really want to do more than 11 if we can avoid it. So now, there are some beautiful ways that you can experiment, and we will talk to you more about that at the practitioner assessment retreat. But I want to just give you a little bit of insight on how clever Gary Young was in creating this particular rule of thumb, because Gary always said we start with Valor and then oregano and thyme on the feet, and then straight onto the back with oregano and thyme, providing those oils weren't contraindicated. I just want to give you a little bit of background about oregano and thyme. Now, oregano emotionally is the oil of humility and non-attachment, and thyme is the oil of releasing and forgiveness. So when we're thinking about setting up what raindrop technique is going to look like, and we're using those fundamental oils of Valor, oregano, and thyme, we are setting up the client or the recipient in a place where they can be in a humble space, not attached to anything, ready to release and forgive if need be. I just think that's beautiful. And I know Gary was an incredibly intelligent man who had a very vast understanding of oils, not just physically, but spiritually and emotionally as well. So I want to then also point out that you could potentially perform the entire raindrop with the ancient scripture oils. Of course, you would start with Valor, oregano, and thyme on the feet, oregano and thyme on the back, and then just the scripture oils, ensuring you don't go over 11. But I would just recommend with cassia to not use it as such or use it heavily diluted. It's like the hot brother of cinnamon oil. Cassia is incredibly hot, very high in phenols. So just be mindful of that. The other thing you could do is you could just do tree oils. You could potentially do a raindrop starting with your Valor, oregano, and thyme, and then maybe black spruce, pine, blue cypress, cedarwood, balsam fir, and frankincense. But what you need to remember is record all the oil changes in the raindrop log. Now we're going to teach you more about the raindrop log at your practical training session. So don't worry about that too much now. But the reason we want you to record any oil changes that you make is because you're going to have people come to you and say, wow, that raindrop was so different. What did you do differently? And so you want to be able to have a record of what their experience was like based on particular oils that they used or that you used on them, so that then they can learn for themselves what oils best support them based on what their current needs are, whether it be physical, spiritual, or emotional. All right. Now, in your textbook, there is a picture here that has all of the relevant oils for emotional application of raindrop technique. It's on page 141 in your textbook. Now, if you're not familiar with the range of Young Living oils and blends, this chart will actually point you in the right direction for which oils to use for emotional application. So I want you to think about this for a moment. Let's say someone comes to you and they're stressed. You want to give them their first raindrop, but you want it to be all the original raindrop oils that come in your raindrop kit. That's wonderful. And then they go away and they feel amazing, and then they come back to you and they say, oh, I felt so good after that, but then the stress just came piling back on. You might decide that you will apply the oils relevant to where it says stressed on the emotional application chart. Now have a notice here in the center, it says Valor, oregano, and thyme. And then we have spikenard, sandalwood, vetiver, valerian, rutavala, peace and calming, and harmony. Now, spikenard's not available at present. It used to be in the ancient scripture oils, but it's been taken out. So even without that, there's still 6 oils remaining that could be used for someone who was feeling excessively stressed, plus the 3 of the Valor, Oregano, and Thyme in the initial setup of your raindrop technique, and you're still adhering to the 9. Another beautiful way that a person can work through their emotions is, some people have a really hard time being kind to themselves. They're quick to call themselves stupid, or they're really down on themselves, or they have a tendency to self-punish. People who experience autoimmune diseases will very often benefit from the essential oils that are listed under self-loathing, because when you have an autoimmune disease, it's actually the cells of the body attacking the body. The body's effectively attacking itself. That kind of, it's almost like this physical sign that says, stop being so hard on me, stop attacking yourself. And so these beautiful oils like Sensation, Acceptance, Western Red Cedar we don't have here in Australia, but cedarwood would work just as well. Jasmine, ylang ylang, and rose, they are all beautiful oils that are going to benefit somebody who has an issue with those. Negativity, sometimes people can't get out of that, negative mindset. The negative Nellies, I'm sure we all know someone who falls into that category. A raindrop technique with, starting with your Valor, Oregano, and Thyme, and then going to Believe, Awaken, Idaho Balsam Fir, Frankincense, and Palo Santo. Absolutely beautiful for shifting that mindset. And if it's someone that you know and care about that you perform that particular raindrop on, you've got a better chance of gauging how that affects them. But even if you don't know them, you can always say to people, do you feel any of these emotional applications will be of benefit to you? Now, as I said before, in your textbook, you will see what the oils are for fear, grief, anger, and clarity. And I'm going to leave that there now. So I hope you enjoyed that video. I could talk about emotions all day long, but I have a whole other course around that. So thanks, and I'll see you in the next video.